All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the problem set. Remember to stop it, try it yourself, and then check your answer. Okay? Okay, so our first question says write the decomposition that helps you and then round to the given place value. Draw number lines to explain your thinking. Circle the rounded value in each number line. Now, the way I like to do this is first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the number up here, 32 and 697. Now it says that we're rounding the first one to the tenths place. And I know the tenths place is the 6. So I'm looking at this number starting off. And that's my number that's going to be on the bottom line, 32 and 6 tenths. Now I know since we're rounding to the tenths place, that my next one is going to be one more tenths, which would be 32 and 7 tenths. That means my midpoint between these two numbers is going to be 32 and 6 tenths plus my thousandths position, my hundredths position, which is going to be a 5. Now at this point, I'm going back to the original number. And my 5 is in the hundredths place. So I'm looking at the hundredths place, and I see it has a 9. So I know 9 hundredths is going to be roughly right about here on my vertical number line. And that means that we would round up. So our answer would be 32 and 7 tenths. Now the next one, we're going to write the number out again, 32 and 697. And this time it's telling me that we're going to round to the hundredth position. So the hundredth position is a 9. So I'm going to go like this because I like identifying the number. And that's going to be 32 and 69 hundredths. One more hundredths would be 32 and 70 hundredths. My midpoint between these two is going to be 32 and 69 hundredths, but I need one more, which is going to be 5 thousandths. Now, in order to place this number on our vertical number line, I'm going to look at the last digit, or the digit after what I've identified, which is a 7 thousandths. And I know the 7 thousandths would be approximately right here. So we know we would round up since it's on or above the midpoint. So we would have an answer of 32 and 70 hundredths since they said they wanted to round to the hundredth. Now, could I also say 32 and 7 tenths? Yes, I could. But the only reason I'm leaving it at 70 hundredths is because they told me to round to the hundredths position. All right, our last one. Our last one says we're going to round to the 1. Now remember, if you're rounding to the 1, that's like saying you're going to round to the whole number. You are not going to have any decimals. So I'm going to write my number up top here, which is 32 and 697. We're rounding to the ones place, so I know we're looking at this number right here. So my bottom one would be that number, which is 32. My top possible number would be 33. In the center, I'd be 32, and since I'm looking at this, the next digit, which is the 6 tenths. So I know, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the 5 tenths. We got 32 and 5 tenths for a midpoint. Now we're looking at this thousandths position, and we know the 6 would be approximately here. And that says we're going to round to 33 as our whole number, or to our ones place. Okay, so this next one says round 141 and 999 thousandths to the nearest tenth, hundredth, 10, and 100. So we're going to start by coming over and we're going to rewrite the number up here as 141 and 999. Now it says we're doing to the 10th. So there's my 10th. So that's my starting point. I'm going to go 141.9 and 9 tenths. Now one more tenths. This is a little tricky one. One more tenths would make that 9 a 10. And I know I have to shift my digits. So that would make this a 142.0. because when I go up 1, it'd be 10, and I'd have to carry over to the ones place. Now in the mid, it's going to be 141.9, and then we have our 5 hundredths for our midpoint. Now we're going back to our original number, and we're seeing that the next digit in line in the hundredths place is our 9. So we know that 9 would be right about here. So we'll be rounding to 142 and 0 tenths. Our next one is 141.999. And this one we're going to the hundredth. So this is our hundredth. So this is the number we're starting with. On the bottom, it's going to be 141.99, which is 141.99 hundredths. Now, one more hundredths is going to make that 10, which I carry it to the tenths, which is going to make that 10, which I carry that to the ones, which is going to make that 2. So once again, we're going to 142. Now in the midpoint, we got 141 and 99 hundredths. Then we got to add the 5 thousandths. Now we go back to our thousandths position, and we see that it's a 9. So we're going to put that on our place value, or on our number line. And that, since it's above the midpoint, we know we're rounding to 142 and 00 hundredths. Now the next one, we're going to write our number 141.99, and it says we're going to the 10. Remember, it's not the 10th, but the 10. So I'm looking at this point right here, which this is 14 tens. So since we're working with decimals, I'm going to have 14 tens would be 140. And one more 10 would be 150. Now, because you remember, this is tricky because it said one more 10. Not one more number, but one more 10. That's why I went to 50. Now, our midpoint would end up being 140, but we'd have to have 5 more ones because it's the tens. Because we have 140, and then we'd have 5 ones. Now, we look in a ones position, our actual number has a 1 there. So, rounding to the nearest tens, since it's below the midpoint, we would round to 140. Our last one, we're rounding to the hundreds place, the 100 place. So I'm going to write it out 141.999, and rounding to the hundreds place, which would be this one. So I know the bottom's going to be 100. Now remember, rounded to the hundreds place. So the next 100 would be 200. Now in the center, I know it'd be 100, but it'd also be 50. So we're going to put 150 as our midpoint. Now, we're looking at the next digit, and we can see 140 would be our midpoint. Not our midpoint, but our actual number. So we know it would be approximately here. It's below the midpoint, so we round down to 100. Now we have a word problem. A root beer factory. I love root beer. A root beer factory produces 132,554 cases in 100 days. About how many cases does the factory produce in 1 day? Round your answer to the nearest tenth of a case. Show your thinking on the number line. Okay, so I'm going to start off, and I'm going to draw a little picture to help me out. I know that in a tape diagram that the total amount right here is 132,554 cases. And it says they do that in 100 days. So I know that in 100 days, that's how long it takes. Now, they want to know how much in 1 day. Now this is representing 1 day right here in both places. So I can see by this 132,160, excuse me, 132,554. And we're going to have to divide that by 100. So if we look this 132,554, and we're dividing by 100. Oh, this comes back to some of the stuff we've done previously. Now I know 100 is actually 10 times 10. So this decimal place, which is at the end of a whole number, is going to move 2 place values. Now by dividing by a whole number, I know it's going to get smaller. So I know this decimal is going to move 2 places to the left. 1, 2. So I can see that every day they are going to make 1,325 and 5400ths cases. Now the answer says round it to the nearest tenth. So I'm looking at the nearest tenth right here. So I know my bottom number right here is going to be 1325 and 5/10. The top number is going to be, since we're rounding to the tenths, we're going to be adding one more tenths, which is 1325 and 6/10. Our midpoint is going to be 1325, 5/10, and 5/100. Now we're going back to the original number, and we're looking at the hundreds position, which is right here, and it's a 4. So I know the 4 is going to be roughly right here. So to round this, we know it's below the midpoint, so we know that they will make 1,325.5 cases a day. All right, question number 3. A decimal number has 2 digits to the right of its decimal. If we round it to the nearest tenth, the result is 13 7/10. What is the maximum possible value of this number? Use words and the number line to explain your reasoning. Include the midpoint on your number line. So as you can see, they said they rounded it to 7/10. They rounded it to the tenths. Now the midpoint obviously is going to be 13.75. So we want to know, they want to know what the largest number this could be. Well, I know that if it was on this line and went up, that it would sit there, it would round up, not down. So it has to be 1/10 below, or 1/100th, below this number. So that means it'd be 13 7/4. That's the largest number that we could have that would still round to 13 7/10. Okay, B. What is the maximum number value of this decimal? Well, we know this was, and I'm going to fill out the number line. We know this is 13.7. Excuse me. It wants to know the minimum value. So if I have 13.7 here, and I would take 13.6 here, because I'm looking for the minimum. I'm looking to see how low it can go. I know the midpoint here would be 13.65. And I know that if it was on this midpoint right here, it would round up. If it was below that midpoint, it would round down. So the largest it could be, excuse me, the smallest it could be and still round to 13 7/10 would be 13/65. All right. So now you see we've used unit form to round, and now hopefully it's helped us understand what we're doing when we're rounding more abstractly. And that's what we're doing now. We're using more abstract numbers. Now, rounding by unit form is still good. It depends on which strategy is best for you. Okay? All right. I'll see you tomorrow.